Everyone's waiting for it. Singapore could have a COVID-19 vaccine by early next year.
Cruising in a pandemic, our travel editor is back from a trip to nowhere and will tell us all about it.
And would you order a PLT? McDonald's is going meatless.
A very good evening. It's 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Haryanto Diman.
And I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Let's begin with Singapore's COVID-19 situation. 9 new cases were confirmed today. There was 1 community case and 1 case from a workers' dormitory.
The remaining 7 were imported cases who had been placed on stay-home notices when they arrived in Singapore. Now more details will be released tonight.
Meanwhile, Singapore could have a COVID-19 vaccine by early next year, with the first shipments of the Duke NUS vaccine expected in the first quarter. Arcturus Therapeutics, the American pharmaceutical firm working with the Duke NUS scientists on the vaccine, announced positive preliminary results from the ongoing early-stage clinical trials.
Arcturus added that the Economic Development Board is pumping in some $45 million or 60.5 million Singapore dollars into the manufacture of the vaccine, and will also have the right to purchase up to $175 million of the vaccine at pre-negotiated prices. According to Duke NUS, the results from the trials so far show that the vaccine could be effective as a single dose.
Well, meanwhile, Pfizer and BioNTech announced yesterday that their experimental vaccine is 90% effective at preventing COVID-19 in ongoing phase 3 trials. According to preliminary findings, protection in patients was achieved 7 days after the second of 2 doses and 28 days after the first. Both companies are still awaiting data on safety, which could come later this month.
We're happy to have Professor Dale Fisher here to weigh in. He's from NUS's Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine and also a senior consultant at National University Hospital. Prof, a global race in progress to find a viable COVID-19 vaccine. Now, Pfizer said its vaccine is 90% effective. How would you describe the preliminary results, and what should we keep in mind as clinical trials progress with the various vaccines in development?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. As everyone feels, there's no doubt that this is good early news, but we need to bear in mind the lots of caveats that come with early news. So about over 40,000 people were in the trial, half in the placebo and half in the active arm with the vaccine, and so far only, according to what I've heard, only 94 people have become infected with COVID in that 2 months period. But in those small numbers, it suggested that many more people in the placebo arm got it than in the vaccine arm. And therefore, that's how they've come up with the number that's 90% effective. But so typically we need more than 150 events in a trial like this before we start making claims. But I guess with the 90%, they were pretty excited and decided to release the information, which I must say no one, to my knowledge, outside the Data Safety Monitoring Board has actually seen. So there's the caveats that come with that. Firstly, it's small numbers, and what will happen when there's been a couple of hundred more events? Will it start to even up? Will the vaccine's efficacy wane? So they want to do these trials continuously or they want to keep monitoring these trials over 2 years. So that's for safety, but it's also for the efficacy to see if the people in the vaccine arm start to get increasing number of infections, suggesting that the effectiveness of the vaccine is waning. What worries me is that they're talking about the emergency use authorization so that it can actually be licensed and used. I understand why they want to do that, because, for instance, in the US, we've got 1,000 people dying every day. But nonetheless, we need to be led by the science. So imagine rolling out millions and hundreds of millions of doses and then find that after 2 or 3 months, the effect wears off, for instance. that would be tragic, and it would be tragic for a number of reasons. Firstly, if people get vaccinated, are they more inclined to stop the mask wearing and the distancing? This would be a big concern. Will they stop other clinical trials because they say, oh, we've now got a vaccine that works? So maybe it becomes unethical to put people in the placebo arm. So you can't compare. And it's conceivable that people in the placebo arm of this trial might say, well, I now want to know whether I got placebo or the vaccine. And if I got placebo, I would now like the vaccine, please. So then you lose your people that you're planning on following for 2 years. So this gets very murky now. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Okay, well, an obstacle to getting Pfizer's vaccine is the complex and super cold storage requirements. It needs to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius or below. So, Prof, how soon do you think Singapore will be able to get the Pfizer vaccine, if it's even at all accessible to us when the time comes?
Well, firstly, it's my personal view that I don't believe Singapore will be rushing to the vaccine. Singapore is not really in a bad place in terms of response to the pandemic. Very few cases now. There's still some obviously some social restrictions, and some I guess economic and social hardships taking place. But by and large, we're in a good place, and it would be my feeling. And again, I don't make the decisions, but I would have thought Singapore could wait and let a little bit more time go so that we learn more from the science point of view.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Professor. That was Professor Dale Fisher from the Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine at NUS. He's also a senior consultant at the National University Hospital.
In other local news, Shell Singapore said today that its 1,300-strong workforce in Pulau Bukom will be downsized to 800 in the next 3 years. This as its parent company, Royal Dutch Shell, pivots away from crude oil towards a low-carbon slate of fuels. The restructuring at the Bukom site follows Royal Dutch Shell's announcement in September to cut as many as 9,000 positions worldwide. But other parts of Shell Singapore's business, like the chemical plant in Jurong, will remain unaffected by the restructuring.
3 new features have been rolled out on National Jobs portal My Careers Future to strengthen progressive hiring practices among employers. Employers will be prompted to adhere to official guidelines when placing job advertisements. They will also be guided on how they can craft neutral job ads. Meanwhile, job seekers will have a feature to conveniently report any discriminatory job postings.
According to flash figures from real estate portal SRX Property, sales of resale condominiums hit a 2-year high in October with over 1,500 units sold. This marked the highest monthly resale volume since May 2018. It was also a 21.6% jump from the previous months. Overall prices of resale condos rose by 0.8% from September to October.
Well, last Friday marked Singapore's first cruise to nowhere amid COVID-19.
The Straits Times' travel editor Lee Siu Hua was on board the 2-night cruise. Well, here's a look.
The World Dream mega ship set sail with 1,400 passengers, about 50% of its operating capacity.
Before boarding, they checked in early to be tested for COVID-19 at the Marina Bay Cruise Centre.
Passengers were also given a mice pod for contact tracing.
Self-service buffets were suspended, and restaurants and bars are cleaned and sanitized 3 times a day.
A cap of 250 guests was also imposed for performances in the 900-seat Zodiac Theatre.
Seeing the reaction of the guests, they were really happy. And there's nothing better for entertainers than being on stage doing what they love to do.
They weren't able to have an entertainment for this pandemic. It is really a great time for them to come back right now. So I felt the warm heart during the closing of the show. So it's amazing.
We're welcoming back our regular guests from Singapore, and we're very, very excited to welcome them and serve them again.
Still, despite the social distancing, there was still plenty for passengers to do on board.
Siu Hua is here to tell us more. Siu Hua, tell us first about the mood of the passengers when they board the ship and throughout the trip. How did they feel about essentially being on a cruise to nowhere?
I saw many smiles and there was some misty eyes too, a bit of emotion, because it's been a long time since cruise ships were allowed to sail off from Singapore since March. So there was a lot of pent-up yearning, right, for to travel somewhere, anywhere, and in this case, nowhere, because it was a cruise to nowhere in international waters over 2 nights. Some passengers liked it that there was a greater privacy because the ship was only at half capacity, full capacity 3,004, half capacity 1,007. In fact, it was a little less. So there were more spaces around at the pool, at workshops, and all that. And there was some emotion also because people had not enjoyed themselves watching live theatre for a long time. So they went up to the entertainers to tell them thank you.
So, Siu Hua, were passengers observing the safe management measures, and did they express any difficulties in adhering to them?
Yeah, so I was asking them, look, this cruise is not as free-spirited as cruises tend to be. You're wearing masks, there's safe distancing. It's really the cruise life was really a mirror of the safety measures in Singapore, because this cruise was only for Singapore residents. So fine to dine like in Singapore. However, I think they were comforted. They said that there was a medical center on board, and they knew about the protocols to turn back the ship to Singapore if there was an outbreak. So the ship could have turned back to Singapore in under 6 hours. Having said that, while most of the passengers were comfortable, many of them were veteran cruisers of like as many as 20 cruises, under the belt. The cruise industry knows that they still have to do some educating, some coaxing of would-be passengers to come back.
Right. Now, you've been on cruises before. So what were the differences you noticed on this trip compared to the cruises you've taken pre-COVID? I mean, of course, other than the smaller number of passengers and the safe distancing measures.
I guess it was this whole picture of masks everywhere. And I saw hand washing machines also, like, the soaping and the water flow for 20 seconds. The paper towel pops up. And restaurants were sanitized and cleaned 3 times a day. And I saw the theater being fogged after the show. It was pretty cool. There was a show that I watched of multiple Santas on stage. So the Santas were wearing masks behind the beards. There were, 14 of them, and you could only have like 10 performers unmasked at any time. So that was new.
Well, Siu Hua, if this pilot proves successful, we can expect more of such cruises. What are some things that future passengers should keep in mind? Any tips and advice for them?
Right. So pandemic cruising is all about safety and also having fun. So if you fuse these two together, the tips would have to do with keep observing safe practices. Cruises to nowhere are for Singapore residents. So the same rules apply on the cruise as in Singapore. And also be mentally prepared for COVID-19 tests until we find a vaccine. I had to do 2 before and after the cruise. It was better than I imagined. And also the other tip is to chill, because even though we are vigilant, it's been an anxious year for everyone. So to me, it's a blessing to be able to relax.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show to share your experience with us, Siu Hua. We've been speaking to travel editor for the Straits Times, Siu Hua. She went on Singapore's first cruise to nowhere over the weekend, and her account of the trip is linked below if you're watching us on YouTube. In the global headlines, Hong Kong will extend its existing social distancing measures by another 7 days. These measures were due to expire this Thursday and included mandatory mask wearing in public places, as well as group gatherings of no more than 4 people. Acting Chief Executive Matthew Cheung said that over the past week there were still untraceable new cases being reported, and the trend of local cases has been growing. If you recall, Hong Kong has agreed to a travel bubble with Singapore, but no start date has been officially set yet.
US President-elect Joe Biden made an urgent plea for Americans to wear face masks to slow the spread of the coronavirus. This as he announced a 13-member COVID-19 task force. Speaking in Delaware after meeting with the members, he said, quote, "It doesn't matter who you voted for, where you stood before Election Day, we can save tens of thousands of lives if everyone would just wear a mask for the next few months." The magnitude of Mr. Biden's task became starkly clear as the US surpassed 10 million cases and the number of cases continues to soar.
McDonald's will launch a new plant-based McPlant burger to cater to the growing number of people who don't eat meat. The new line will be produced exclusively for the fast food giant by Beyond Meat, a company specializing in vegan meat substitutes. It will be introduced in selected markets next year. McDonald's is also reportedly considering plant-based substitutes for chicken products and its egg and bacon breakfast sandwiches.
Now, many have been through it at some point this year, a lockdown that is, which Collins Dictionary named as Word of the Year for 2020. Collins registered over 250,000 usages of lockdown this year, which has become synonymous with the experience of populations around the world. Well, no surprise then that 6 of Collins's 10 words of the year in 2020 are related to the COVID-19 global health crisis.
Well, that's pretty apt, right?
Yeah.
Lockdown as word of the year according to Collins. If you would have a word?
My word would be unprecedented.
Ah, yes.
Right?
Yep.
I think we have that word a lot in our reports.
Yes, of course. Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.